afternoon, everybody, and happy last 48 hours of cold, wet, miserable, inclement Tory rule. Welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox, and joining me today is friend of the show, Mark Steele, former Mirror columnist. Don't know what you are now, probably Mirror freelancer like the rest of us. Hello, Mark.
Hello. I'm cheering today.
Sorry we're a bit late this morning. The hamster refused to interface with the wheel this morning, so this is a lunchtime special. It's not because we overslept, I promise. Now, this is a People's Pay-Per-View, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast are just going to have a preemptive sleep so you can stay up all night long tomorrow. So, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has channelled the England football team and splashed on Keir Starmer's pledge to end 14 years of hurt, which never stopped us dreaming of a better Britain. And before we move on to the stories, Mark, do you think that comparing the Labour Party to a football team that never seems to get past the quarterfinals is really the right message to be sending out?
Yeah. Oh, I quite like that headline because it's quite clever, but I hadn't. Yeah, not at the moment.
I liked it, but then I thought,
Keir Starmer will get to the halfway line, get just outside the box, and then pass it back to Rachel Reeves, who will pass it back to Jonathan Ashworth, who will then pass it sideways, but misplace the pass and knock it out for a throw. Is that what it means?
No, maybe it means that Angela Rayner is just going to boot somebody and handball it in the back of the net and then have a fight with the ref. Yeah. And just not care anymore. I don't know, but
no, I know. I think for people who've been following the England team, it's probably not quite right. But I don't know. That doesn't make any difference at this point, does it?
No, probably not. No, but who reads the Mirror anyway? But
it's terrible if suddenly the Tories won, and then there were all these polls, and they went, "Well, there was just this headline in the Mirror that just didn't make sense, and it just made us change our mind after 2.5 years." And we thought, do you know what? I forgive them all the parties and everything because they were basically exposing a paper that ran a headline that compared the Labour Party to the England football team that was entirely negative and only just beat Slovakia.
So why not vote for the Tories after all that? Do you think, though, that, Keir's been doing an awful lot of this stuff in football grounds and so on. He launched the campaign in Gillingham Town FC. This one he's pictured at Hucknall Town, I think, in Nottinghamshire. Is he looking more like a man of the people than Rishi Sunak, or is anyone? The King looks like more of the man of the people than Rishi Sunak does.
Well, I think at the risk of sounding like a politician, the way to answer that question is to say it doesn't really matter. Just let your emotions run away with you and think that at last, in a few hours, we are going to be rid of these filthy, rapacious, verminous, gluttonous, disgusting, despicable, vile excuses for human beings who use COVID pandemics as an excuse to parcel out billions worth of contracts to their filthy, rotten, horrible mates, and who talk about letting bodies pile high, and who are utterly psychopathic and sociopathic in their rampant narcissism. In the case of Boris Johnson, who for some reason only in England people think would make a decent prime minister because he misuses phrases in Latin that he learnt in the odd moment that he was listening when he was at his filthy, rotten school. That's an epitome of inequality and rotten, despicable people who managed to maintain their position as prime minister for about 3.5 hours, during which time they managed to kill the Queen and destroy the country's economy, are just filthy, horrible people, and they're going to be gone. And I think the King should intervene and make this election campaign go on for another 3 weeks, because it's wonderful watching them squirm. It is. In fact, the actual vote, it's not right that they should all be gone over the space of about 4 hours. It's too much to take in at once. It's like having your 12 favourite curries all served at once. It's not enough time to enjoy and appreciate them.
Are you saying you want the general election results to drop on Netflix like weekly?
Yes. There should be 1 an hour So you've just about had time to watch Jacob Rees-Mogg squirm and his face to contort and his monocle to fall out. Oh, well, I think that this is rather the reason why we should abolish democracy and have a dictatorship. And then he should be gone. And then we should go to, I don't know, whoever loses, who's going to be next, Jeremy Hunt. 1 hour. It's too much to have it all. You won't have time. It'll be like four of them going on at once.
It will all be an awful lot, and the fact that it happens overnight is always a bit irritating. But 1 hour means 27 days.
If you're 83 and you go, oh, I can't stay up all night, just get your grandson to give you some MDMA and stay up. You'll be fine. I'm not really advocating that on the Daily Mirror. I'm just doing it metaphorically.
But if we did have all 650 general election results, 1 hour, just dropping with sort of steady, repetitive sound of an axe dropping onto a block, then that would be 27 days.
Okay.
Be a whole month, be all of February.
Yeah, you found a flaw in my argument.
It would be a bit much, wouldn't it? Anyway, what do you think, everybody? Are you as delighted as Mark clearly is that we're getting to the end of this and we're getting to the end of the Tories, or are you weeping and wailing and wondering what on earth's going to go wrong next because something's bound to happen? Sean says Labour to restore sanity in our politics. We need growth and a united front. That's how we unlock growth and investment. Can I just compare what Sean's saying there to 2019? All right. Jeremy Corbyn is just about to take Labour to its biggest defeat in history. My electrician is banging something in that wall. I can't do anything about it. And nobody anywhere in Britain was saying that Labour would restore sanity, would create economic growth, would unite people, that it would bring investment. And yet we are saying that about Labour today. And that is the message, if you like. If nothing else, whether you believe it or not, it shows, doesn't it, Mark, that Keir Starmer's really done a 360 for that party?
Well, I think that Jeremy Corbyn had odds against him that were far, far greater than Keir Starmer. Now, I think there were many, many things wrong with the way Labour fought the campaign under Jeremy Corbyn in 2019, but he had the odds were so much more stacked against him. The media, I don't agree with blaming the media for all of that, but it certainly had an impact. It was, and of course, a good deal of the Labour Party tacitly, or maybe even more than that, went along with those attacks. Also, the two things that really destroyed the Conservatives were, I don't think this was all of it by any means, but the two pillars, if you like, of their collapse in support was the exposing of the parties during COVID, which did for Johnson, and then Liz Truss.
Yeah,
and I don't think
existing was a big problem for them. Someone calls themselves proselytizing Pentecostal Angora Rabbit, possibly not their real name, says that they still don't trust. They're still not convinced Labour can be trusted. Sorry, proselytizing Orthodox Pentecostal Angora Rabbit. Difference there. I'm still not convinced Labour can be trusted, not after Corbyn, but it is improving. If an Angora Rabbit who's an Orthodox Pentecostal more than anything else can be convinced slowly, then maybe Keir Starmer's getting through somewhere. Now, on to our first story of the day. On page 12, the Mirror is reporting that a bench has been installed outside the Tory party HQ. When I say Tory party HQ, I'm kind of thinking this is its party HQ, but with Tories, as opposed to the headquarters of a political party. They're so tied into Partygate now. Now, this is not somewhere for them to rest their weary heads after a long night of illegal raves, but it's a memorial to an estimated 14,000 people who have died waiting for emergency care due to NHS delays on the Tory watch. Now, pictured on that bench there is Samina Rahman, whose husband Iqbal died in her arms while an ambulance was delayed because it was queuing to offload the previous patient at A&E, and Matthew Hubert, whose mum Jackie died of sepsis after she was left lying on her bedroom floor for 11 hours waiting for an ambulance. Now, Samina says they bought the bench to Tory HQ because, and I quote, they bear responsibility for these deaths by deliberately underfunding our health service. Now, Mark, you and I have both spent lots of time recently around hospitals, me with my dad, you with yourself, for different reasons. Do you think what Samina says there is fair?
Yeah.
Or is that much?
No, it's entirely fair. And it sounds a strange thing to say, but having had cancer, I was quite lucky because that's something that is properly funded, and I was at a hospital that is properly funded, and so I got nothing but praise for the people who were looking after me. But I know that that's not always that's very much not the case for lots of things outside of cancer, which is the sort of thing that is mostly funded.
The emergency business, isn't it? When you're really desperate, when you're going, crikey, fix this, rapid, please, it hurts or it's bleeding or I'm going to die if you don't, and you need that ambulance and you need that very quick, rapid now, that's what doesn't seem
and it's not funded, and that's the reason, and it's because there isn't the staff, because they are not paid well enough. Marvellous as they are, they need to be paid, and then as their pay in real terms goes down, then they're just treated with utter contempt by this government. So it's entirely fair. They were treated with complete contempt during the pandemic when there wasn't even enough protective equipment for them and so on, and they were having to use bin liners and were then treated with derision by Matt Hancock, who just seemed to think the whole thing was a laugh. And I refer everybody to my earlier comments. And it's just despicable. And then they had how many billions has been made by, I don't know, these companies. I've still got this stuff. Look at this. I don't know what to do with it. These little bottles here. The company that makes them, they make a vast fortune by.
This is your liquid food that you had when you had to eat through a tube.
Yeah, so for about 4 or 5 months, I couldn't eat or swallow anything. So I was having to feed myself with a syringe directly into the stomach with this stuff. And the people who deliver it and everything were all wonderful, marvellous. But the company that makes this stuff, I don't know how much it's made. Vast sums of money by delivering these things. And the health service has to pay them. And this sort of privatisation of bits and pieces of the health service that run their part of the operation for profit, they get looked after. The people who were commissioned, like Michelle Mone and her company, who were commissioned to make things that they had very little experience of making because they had connections with people in the government, these people have made vast sums of money. And the people who work in the health service ended up having to scream and beg for a wage rise that would even restore them to the not very good wages that they had 10, 15 years.
They got clapped, Mark.
They got clapped, exactly. Well, I think I wrote a column in the Sunday Mirror saying that they should, the government should say we are more than willing to give them a 25% raise in claps, maybe even introducing a cheer on a whistle for those that have proved themselves worthy of such a claim.
Okay.
I really
vote them out.
Really am looking forward to them going. And when people go, "Oh yeah, but what difference will it make?" I don't know. Don't worry about that just yet. Just I don't know if it's different. They don't. Not, but that doesn't matter. Just enjoy yourself while you can.
Yeah, people don't tend to vote for.
Sorry, let me say this: that none of this is to diminish the very real emotional pull of the story that we started with here, which is that these people died and didn't need to.
Yeah. Now, Curlis says there's been £130 billion of waste under this Tory government, yet they never admit to it and choose to blame the poor for all the problems. They also blame Vladimir Putin, a virus, general energy problems, which has nothing to do with the fact we haven't got enough power stations and we've been trying to build them for years and have failed to do it, honest and whatever. Now, this bench that we actually were talking about 10 minutes ago has been funded by a patient campaign group called Just Treatment, at the same time as a petition signed by 12,500 patients has called on the Prime Minister, whoever that might be by the time the petition actually gets delivered, to boost total NHS spending so that it at least matches the European average by next year. Now, due to electoral law, we need to be scrupulously fair to all parties. So let's just point out here that the Tories keep saying the NHS costs too much. They give it enough already. And perhaps there are people out there who think it's terribly terribly unfair and a bit of a stunt that a bench has been put outside Tory HQ as if to make my electrician bang the hammer just on that wall there.
That electrician, actually, I was lucky because I know Morse code, and that.
I've got something I want to say.
Absolutely in agreement with Mark, and he then swore, I'm afraid, but in Morse code.
Now, the thing is that let's consider them. Once we're being fair to the Tories, there are people who probably think that putting this bench there is sort of some kind of a stunt. And it was very unfair because it was put there to all these people who were going to die anyway. They've just died a bit sooner, so what? But then let's consider the fact that yesterday the Tories wheeled out to support them and say their case a pathological liar, an egotistical, narcissistic, shambling mess of an embarrassing, unpopular, chaotic Prime Minister who allegedly said, let the bodies pile high, while refusing and dithering and delaying over lockdowns, which would have saved lives, helped the NHS cope better, not just with COVID, but with what's happening now. And they did this. They did this yesterday, Mark, because they thought it would make them seem more popular. More popular to bring out that man. Do you have any idea, because I've worried about this for the last sort of 24 hours, do you have any idea what Rishi's thinking?
Yeah, I think so, because having been a comic many years, I know that, when you start, and in fact...
He's just taking the piss now. Is that...
No, because there are moments when it's gone wrong, and... Yeah. Especially now, I sort of hope I'm going to be a bit more measured with it. But there's times when you're on stage and it's all gone wrong. When you do the clubs early on and they're not listening, no one's listening, and you think, what do I do? And you speed up and your mouth goes dry and you panic and you think there are comics I know who have just dropped their trousers. Anything, and dropping your trousers is what he's done. That's the equivalent of... I don't know, Boris Johnson, let's get him out. No, it's made it worse. In fact, I think by tonight, Rishi Sunak will drop his trousers. Nothing works. And you don't understand that it's gone past the point where there's anything you can do. People have made their mind up. They don't like you. They're not even listening. And so that's why he's got Boris Johnson out. If he was 4% behind in the polls, he wouldn't have done it because he would have studied it. But, I think that's the reason. Also, I don't think he can even trust the people around him because they're all lining up to take over from him, aren't they? So he can't talk to anyone very much. So he just makes decisions on his own. That's why he ended up going out in the rain and running away from D-Day. There's not a team of people like in the thick of it that's advising him. Or if they are, he doesn't even trust them. So
he does. He's got this really small team who are quite posh and themselves insulated from the rest of the world. There's not an awful lot of, people in there who've got a lot of real world experience on other things, as like James Forsyth from The Spectator and Narissa Chesterfield. Right. These are just political wonks who are just in there.
I get someone from The Spectator because, if you want to get yourself more in touch with the common man and woman, then where else do you turn? But The Spectator.
Exactly. And Leslie says, hello, Leslie. Rishi wants to lose this election simply because he cannot solve the mess they created. His trousers already dropped and he's mooning us at this stage. What a horrid thought. Now, what do you think, everybody? Have you had problems getting emergency care at the NHS? Have you had any particular issues with that? What do you think about Boris coming back yesterday? Is he going to make any difference or not to how people are going to vote? It was interesting. A lot of his speech was all about Tory voters not voting for reform. Some attacks on Keir Starmer as well. But really, he's appealing to the Tory base, which Rishi has lost and which Liz Truss lost and which they're trying to get back just so they don't all get massacred on Thursday night, to be honest. That is interesting, that bench. The fact that there's about 14,000 people that it marks the unnecessary deaths of, and it's outside Tory HQ. It's probably going to be the place where Boris Johnson's next love child is conceived more than anything else. I doubt any of them are going to notice that it's there. Now, On to the main story of the day. Most newspapers, not just the Mirror, which you might expect, but papers like the FT even, have come out in support of Labour and urged their readers to vote for Keir Starmer's team tomorrow. Now, 20% of people have already voted by post if they got their ballots in time. I did mine last week. 80% are going to the ballot box tomorrow. Starmer's warning some people might think this is the win is so definite that there's no point voting. They can stay home. Labour will win anyway. Do you buy into that, Mark? Is this nailed on? And how do you tend to vote? Are you going to go down the polling stage, down the school hall tomorrow?
Yeah, I love it. I feel so grown up because I've never really felt grown up. And if you're a comic, your whole job depends on never feeling grown up. And I just can't believe that I'm allowed to be responsible enough to choose a government. I shouldn't be really allowed to vote if in a reasonable democracy, but I am. And I just feel it just makes me so excited. I get a little.
I believe you've got imposter syndrome about democracy.
Yeah. Well,
that's the idea that you can go into a polling station and not feel some power as you wield that.
Yeah, I feel enormous power, but I do think, are you sure? Are you sure I'm on the electoral register?
But yeah. Who I am.
And I shall go with my daughter, and I shall I'll feel doubly grown up. And I think some things are certain. I think it's always the case if you're used to losing that you think something's going to go wrong. If you're a football fan, as I am, you know what it's like to be 4-0 up with a minute to go and think, I think I'll take a draw at this point. But there's not any, it's entirely irrational to think that this could end up with anything other than a substantial Labour majority. But it's still very exciting because the exact nature of that is still very much uncertain. You know, the Tories could end up with 150 seats, in which case I think they'd probably feel quite relieved, or they could end up not even as the opposition with only 50 seats. All of those things. Farage could do better than expected and end up with quite a base of 12, 15 seats. I hope that doesn't happen. I think it probably won't. But
end up with next to nothing. That'll be good.
Yeah.
Because there's been
four seats possible, which I think would be brilliant.
And at one point at the start of the election campaign, some of the polls were talking about hung parliament, and that was what Rishi was talking about for the first few weeks. If you don't vote for us in big enough numbers, there'll be a hung parliament. He was warning. 6 weeks later, what he's now doing is, well, please don't murder me too hard on the way out. It's turned an awful lot in the last 6 weeks, the messaging, really. Curler says, I still say it won't be as big a majority as people think. People won't bother voting. My mum and dad threw away their ballot papers. They don't see the point in voting this time. I'll tell you the point voting this time, although it's too late for your mum and dad, is the boundary changes. My boundaries in my constituency have changed, and that means that what previously might have been safe seats for one side or the other, all over the country, has changed. And no one is quite sure. People are predicting what might be a safe seat now, but you're not really sure, and it's all up for grabs. What about you, Mark? Have you got any boundary changes or any hope of...
I don't think so. I vote in Hove, strangely, because I'm so bad at filling in forms that years ago when I lived in Hove, I can't be doing with filling the form to... God, is that illegal? I'm not.
No, you're only allowed to register in one place. But
all right, no, I'm only in one place. But so...
I think Lorraine told me that.
That used to be very, very close, used to be Conservative not that long ago, and now it's Peter Kyle is the MP there. So I shall vote there, and he will win that for sure. But yeah, I agree with you about the boundary stages. And also, I think the polls probably aren't quite as accurate, or they can't quite as confident as they were, because there are now 5 or even 6 parties that are getting a substantial vote. So once you've got the Green Party getting possibly 7% and Farage getting somewhere between 12 and 18%, I think that makes it much more difficult to predict each constituency. So they seem to me to be much less certain about individual constituents, and that's why there's a huge disparity. All the models show Labour winning by a lot, but
And last time, in 2019, the Brexit Party, which Farage was in one of his previous incarnations, he's had more incarnations than the Doctor so far, but he stood down a lot of candidates in Tory seats because of the Brexit thing, and Boris Johnson did a deal. So last time, if you look at the electoral maps, the support for that kind of politician and the kind of things Farage tends to talk about, which is, banning all milkshakes being hurled anywhere and everyone being forced to wear red trousers by order of legislation. That kind of stuff is completely understated in the previous election. No one knows really what the support for that was last time because it's all got melded into the Tory vote. This time, a lot of the Tory vote is just going somewhere else, whether it is going down the pub, whether it is going to Nigel, whether it is going back to bed for the day. We don't know, but the Tory vote's just going somewhere.
And of course, the last couple of days, he does appear to have lost support from those people who were going to vote reform, but have seen all of the.
And he's suddenly realised he's racist.
Yeah, and I can understand that because
a lot of racists in it.
I can understand that because once you've decided to vote for someone who used their platform on television to say the problem with the health service was foreigners coming over here using it because they've all got AIDS, and they've putting up posters all across Britain saying breaking point with a line of immigrants. I mean, where are the clues that he might be racist in any way? So it's obviously come as a shock.
Yeah, it's also complaining that he didn't hear English on the train on the way back to
I heard people. I was on a train and I heard several people speaking in a language that wasn't English, and I felt rather uncomfortable. And I always thought, well, that's a mental illness if foreign languages make. That's like being one of these people who's scared of buttons or something, isn't it?
Especially when your wife is German. But when she speaks to her family, his wife, then she'd have been speaking in German.
Me feel uncomfortable. Stop saying Guten Tag.
I don't think he feels uncomfortable around German. Sorry. Now, moving on to other things. So we've got this thing that, Keir's saying, make sure you do vote because there is still a point. It can still be a bit tight. You must go and vote because although you've got these boundary changes, it can come down to a few hundred votes. As we were saying on the show on Monday with Count Binface, who was not Count Boniface, but Count Binface, there might be only 700 odd votes in it in Rishi's own constituency. So there'd be lots of recounts. Every vote could count. So vote, everybody, if you get the chance. And my dog agrees. Now, Keir was giving this interview in these football stadiums. He's making all these football analogies and so on. He's obviously doing what you once did, Mark. He's touring the regions, right? He's been building up his act. He's going to all the dodgy dives, the local town FCs and things like that. He's not going to Anfield or Old Trafford. He's going to some of the smaller places. Do you think it's working? Is he appealing to people as football's the national sport. It's far more of a leveler than what we've had with previous prime ministers who just want, talk about rugby and cricket, stuff like that. Whereas Keir is more of a, does the football make a difference, do you think?
Well, not really. I mean, I think his problem is that he's not addressing the things. He tries to address them, but he's not really addressing the things that would win those people over. And I think that even the sort of energy companies, taking the energy companies and water companies away from these absolute thieves that have used them to just reap billions that they've shared out with their shareholders while pouring muck into the sea and all the things that they've done, that sort of thing. The railway companies that people are so sick of, all these are not, even amongst conservative voters, nationalising those companies would be popular. I think there's all sorts of things like that which would speak to the common person rather than saying we're not going to change very much in Gillingham's football ground.
No, possibly not. Although I think Gillingham itself is probably one of those seats they're trying to target. And if you turn up, go to their football ground, they go, "Oh, good Lord, we've got someone in," and they're actually quite chuffed about it for once.
Yeah. I mean, and that is the problem with this whole campaign for the last 6 weeks is that if you think when the Greeks invented this democracy, they would imagine that an election campaign would be when we debate all of those issues that are governing us, which right now would be climate change and the fact that we've got untold wealth and yet we've got record numbers of people at food banks, and we've got these energy companies run by these people who are the least responsible, the last people in the country who should be allowed to run an energy company. All of these things, immigration and that, all of that. And, well, that gets mentioned, but only in the most base of terms. And, I heard someone on the radio this morning on a phone-in thing complaining about immigration and then complaining about how we need hundreds of thousands more houses. And, of course, the only way to build the houses will be to get people from other countries to come over here. But they should be allowed over here for the day and then go back to Poland at night because we can't afford to have them over here. All of this, right? But all of those things should have been debated. They should be part of a big national debate in which millions of people are taking part. But it isn't. It's all about nonsense about Rishi Sunak and whether he had Sky TV or not. So it's so much less than it should be.
Well, exactly. We're not talking, like you said, we're talking about Rishi Sunak's Sky TV when he grew up, whether or not Keir Starmer's allowed to have Friday night dinner with his family. And we're not talking about the energy crisis, social care, immigration, the fact that you need immigration to actually fund all the pensioners for all the people who keep voting not to have so many immigrants around. All this kind of stuff that just isn't getting talked about at all. But if we had that kind of Greek democracy you're talking about, they would have been standing, it would just be men talking to each other in togas.
There were downsides.
Having to say about it.
There were downsides to it, and that was one of them. Slavery was another, but if we could just brush that aside.
Let's park that for a moment. Because what we do have now, which they didn't have in ancient Greece, is postal voting. And on the second spread, which is underneath a picture of Rishi Sunak looking at a cow's backside, for no good reason, really, other than it's quite fun. There's this debacle about postal votes, which may or may not have been posted out, may or may not be returned in time. They think it's going to affect about 90 seats. Royal Mail says it's all fine, but where have we heard that before? The Electoral Commission says they haven't noticed any systemic problems. Do you think, what we were saying, I suppose, Mark, about how perhaps 1 or 2 seats it can come down to a few votes now, do you think this is going to have an impact or not?
I do, I suppose. Well, any vote, you can't on the one hand say that every vote counts and then say, but if a few votes.
Yeah. And the people who are going to vote postally are sort of shift workers. It's older people, it's housebound people, it's disabled people. It's, there's more than 10 million people expected to vote by post this year, like what I do. I always do. I do it with my daughter, and she has to read the instructions out for the envelopes because I just get confused and I've done it wrong so many times. So the 8-year-old reads it out to me and we agree who we're voting for. Leslie says there's no mention of us disabled apart from making us targets again in the election campaign. Quite right. And again, not with the postal votes. Whenever people talk about postal votes, they don't say, well, this is people who are a bit housebound and find it difficult to get out, or who are shift working, for example, who work in the NHS, who are working all the hours God sends on something. Those are the people who are, of course, perhaps less likely to vote Conservative, generally speaking, especially right now at the moment. Although it's not linked, this debacle with not getting the votes out, it's not linked to the fact they called it a snap election, apparently, people scrabbling to register in time. But who's going to stay up for the election?
Do you think he'll do Rishi Sunak by Friday morning? Do you think he'll go, I've got one last thing to try, and he'll come out and go, it was a fraud. Everybody knows it. The votes were counted wrong.
No, I think on Friday morning he's going to say, I'm going to work hard and I'm still going to be leader of the Tory party. And then he'll go into Tory HQ. They'll just shove him in a bag. They'll stamp him airmail to Peru or whatever, and just get him on a jet and fire him out of here, either out of a cannon or out of a Gulf Stream or something. They'll want rid of him after this because he's going to be toxic as Boris Johnson and Liz Truss is, which is significantly so. Now, Ian says he's staying up to watch it. Ian, you look probably about my age, although I don't know what's going on with your sun cream across your nose there. But I don't know. I want to stay up to watch it. I don't think I'm going to be physically capable of doing so, though, Mark. What are your plans for tomorrow night?
I'm going to watch the results with my daughter. It's my birthday tomorrow.
Right.
Son who's periodically comes in and out of shot here, like one of those little things during COVID when the He's 27, so he's not got quite the same excuse.
He's not in a little stroller. That's a shame. It'd be good if he was in a little stroller. So what are you doing? What are you doing tomorrow night?
I'm going to watch the results with my daughter, and then I'm probably, because I will be in Brighton, because I've got to go down there to vote, I'm probably going to go and meet some people I know from the Green Party in the middle of Brighton.
Right, 4:00 in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to stay up all night. You can't not stay up all night.
I haven't stayed up all night since 1997, and I'm a middle-aged lady now, and I don't know if I can really do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and have a preemptive nap in the afternoon. Right. I'm going to be alert and on it for 10 o'clock in the exit polls, which Keir Starmer says in the interview today in the Mirror that he's going to be. That's the one that he's worried about. He's going to bank it all on the exit poll because they're usually pretty accurate. So he's going to be waiting for whoever's doing it for the BBC. It's not Dimbleby anymore, is it? It's not Hugh Edwards. It's just whoever they can find who hasn't got a sex scandal at the moment is going to be anchoring for the BBC, doing the exit poll. And then I think I'll probably stay up till about midnight when you get those first two counts when they run in and they race each other to be first. I think it's in the northeast, isn't it? Blythe Valley and one of the others.
Oh, you've got to stay up.
They have that little run. So I'll stay up for that. But then there's only a couple of counts due until about 3:00 in the morning. So then I'm going to go back to bed, try and have some rest. I'll set the alarm for like 3-4 o'clock, and then you get a lot tumble. Bash, 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 bash.
You think Keir Starmer? I could just imagine Keir Starmer going, I'm not going to stay up. It's too late for me. I'll give it to about 10:30, and then not with my tummy. And then I'm going to go to bed, and I'll just wake up in the morning, and I'll see who's won.
That'd be nice. I suspect, though, we won't know quite what the score is on Friday morning because I think there's going to be a lot of recounts. More than they usually are. So we might well know who's won. If there's a big enough majority, it'll be clearly Labour, one would have thought. But then by how much they've won by, there might be a couple of dozen seats in contention, maybe, where there are, a few hundred votes of each other and they're going to have to count it again a few times.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised. But, don't take that as gospel. That's just me guessing, really. I think the boundary changes and how close some of them are going to be.
All right, how many Tory MPs are there going to be then?
How many Tory MPs after this? I think 100 or lower.
Oh, okay.
No, you're not going to have more than 100, I don't think. And which would put Labour on about 400 or so, 350, 400. And then I don't think Reform's going to get more than 1 or maybe 2. I know some of the predictions have got them for 6. I don't think they've got enough support in enough places that's focused to get them over the line, to get the one vote more than whoever. Okay. They'll split the vote, but I think that you'd still get Labour in a lot of places. So I'm hoping.
I said 115 when it was called, and I sort of think that's maybe a little bit less than that now.
Yeah,
but there's a possibility that it could be just. I mean, the thing is as well, for comedy purposes, the lower the better. It's a bit like if I'm watching a football match, even if it's between two teams that I don't care about. If one team goes 7-0 up, I really want it to be 10-0 because that's funny.
just start smashing it through now at this point.
It's funny to be 10-0. It's never 10-0, but if it was, that'd be funny. And similarly, if the Tories lost every single seat, even leaving aside my absolutely partisan feelings about it, that would be funny.
It would be funny until Friday morning when Nigel Farage walked into Parliament and said, right. And sort of started bouncing on his toes like he does, like that annoying git at the golf club bar who bounces on his toes and says, well, no, let me speak. And it's quite irritating. I really like it, even if Reform win a couple of seats, if he doesn't win in Clacton. But unfortunately, Labour pulled their bloke out of there. So it's kind of all a bit of a mess in Clacton. I think they've just consigned it to Nigel.
My old friend, Jeremy Hardy, is no longer with us. He said, I remember him saying after the day after the Brexit referendum, which was, in my view and his, a disaster. But he said, but must be a bit of you. And it was true. He said, there's a bit of you that goes, Yeah, but it's a bit like if someone said, I wonder what would happen if we let all the animals out of the zoo. I did feel like there was a bit of me that thought, oh, this will be exciting.
Yeah, and then it was exciting, but in a bad way. One final thing from that interview with Keir that's worth pointing out is that it's predicted to rain on Friday at the moment. Anyway, Keir Starmer has assured the Mirror that when he heads to Downing Street to take over, he will be fully prepared and have an umbrella with him. Now, Mark, is this just what we've come to? Isn't it? There's an actual choice. We're having to choose. Some kind of equivalency is being given to a man who doesn't care if it's lashing it down because he's got a helicopter in standby and he's never experienced rain before in his life, and a man who can always be trusted to take his brolly with him because he's that boring and dull.
You know what would be the funny thing? So what a brilliant start it would be if he's outside Downing Street with his
sunny.
Making that speech. It was sunny, and he got Angela Rayner to stand over him with a watering can, pouring water onto his head. What a brilliant image that would be, wouldn't it? It would say to the country, we're going to be just as rubbish as anything that's gone before, but at least we've got a sense of humour. That'd be a great image, wouldn't it?
I don't know if you got the whole one with Angela. Otherwise, you just have Keir looking wet as well. And I think
that'd be funny.
It's raining.
Water on him.
There'd be people who believe it. I want him to be talking and it's be a bit grey and overcast, and then just a burst of a sunbeam come down. Right? If you were the spin doctor, that's what you'd be keeping for. Now, thank you for all that, Mark, and thank you everyone for your comments. If there's anything other opinions you've got about Keir and what's going to happen on Friday, are you staying up? Are you not staying up? Do you think that the Tories should really have that bench outside their HQ? Let us know, get into the comments. But in the meantime, we have found some good news for you. Here it is. So speaking of the weather on Friday and how we all hope things are going to change, here is a fantastic story to end out the last news agenda of the Tory regime. Little Eddie, age 6, is pictured on page 14 after ringing the bell to mark the end of his treatment at Great Ormond Street for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And get this, everybody, doctors sequenced the entire genome of his family to get information about Eddie's cancer and assess the risk for his brother Leo, who's 4. Now, these fantastic, whizzy, brilliant geniuses were able not only to fix up Eddie, but tell his mum and dad as well they had no reason to worry about his brother, which gave them a huge relief. And at the bottom of the page, there's a story that's saying they're now able basically to map the entire genetic code of a tumour. They can identify every bit of mutation that's causing the growth. That helps them make quicker decisions, the best treatments. It means they can screen other people, reduce the need for biopsies and extra surgeries, checkups for the rest of their lives. They're talking about rolling it out as a screening program in the NHS. It's only £1,000 a time and the cost is dropping. Clearly save thousands of lives. Absolutely brilliant bit of science. Wow, they can map the genome of a tumour. Mark, is this proof that if the NHS does get the money it needs to do the things we would all like it to, then Keir Starmer could just mint 1 million more Labour voters overnight, have an even bigger majority next time?
Yeah, it's astonishing. Just 2 very quick little moments from my sort of cancer mumps. One was when they were telling me what my treatment would be, and this very brilliant Greek man who was a consultant said to me, we'll be able to do this, the radiotherapy, chemotherapy, this is what we're going to do. And he said, and we'll protect your voice, that's really important to you. He said, it's not like the old days, we've got better treatment than that. And I thought, yeah. And then at the end of what he was telling me, he made it clear that by the old days, he meant 5 years ago. So that's the speed at which the science can work if it has the funding to do so. Mm. And the second thing was this PET scan, it was called. I'm still not quite sure what it stands for, but this extraordinary scan that can work out exactly, precisely where each bit of cancerous tissue might be and whether it had spread. So this was quite important for me. And as this nurse was administering this and putting the cannula in and all that, she just stopped for a moment and she just went, "This is the Rolls Royce of scans you're having today, Mr. Steele." And she was so proud of this. I thought it was made me very emotional. She was so proud of this amazing new technology she got. That she was just one person who was administering me into it. And that's the potential. That's the potential that's there, that's shown by this extraordinary story. Without funding, of course, none of it works.
No. It needs all that, doesn't it, to support everything. Thank you very much, Mark, for all of this. I would just like to say today, it's the 3rd of July. It's the 29th anniversary of my very first day on the job as a journalist back in 1995 when I was only 6. It's been nearly 30 years, and here we are. Finally, this is only the second time. In all that time, there might be a Labour government. But I think when I started, we were moaning about hospitals and God knows what as well. Back in 1995, it was. So just shows how things come round full circle, especially if you have too many Tory governments. Thank you very much, Mark, for everything there. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. Don't forget to vote. Go out tomorrow and vote, vote, vote. The Mirror's got an awful lot of stuff. They've got the poll position broadcast, which will come out at 10 o'clock with the exit polls tomorrow. So tune in for that. We'll be back for the news agenda next Monday with a special guest. Until then, everybody, stay safe, vote, and we'll see you on the other side of hopefully a big, massive democratic change. Tatty bye, everyone.